to everybody in India and on the Eastern Hemisphere, and good afternoon and good morning on the Western side. Once again, I'm really delighted to see so many of you coming and attending this. Shakespeare once said, the world is a theater, and I think today, in this world of technology, we are seeing a big theater in front of us. I'm very delighted to say that we have close to 1,000 people today on this session, over 983 more accurate. And so we can see that so much can be done without moving out of the house. And I think once again, lockdown unlocks our imagination, unlocks our potential, and you can do so much, sitting here. Today is a very special day, and I would like to convey happy birthday to Shefali. You are hereby here now, and we are very excited that you are with us today. And you, Dhruv, Rajesh, all have been my kids, like in many ways. It's been so wonderful. It's like family reunion in some ways. And thank you for making it this session today, and also writing a beautiful chapter on fiscally transparent entities and the treaty eligibility. I may just mention that, of course, Rajesh will be moderating the session, and I don't want to take away thunder from him. But a few things that way back in early 90s, state of Wyoming came up with the idea of an entity that was in between a company and a partnership. If you remember, the original businesses were done in the form of proprietorship. Then two or more people started working together, then came partnerships, the oral partnership, then became the written partnership. Sometime in 1920s, in England, they came up with the concept of limited partnership. Because at that point of time, limited companies had already come into being. But they said that in case of partnership, why should all partners take limited liability? Some people are only coming as investors. So those who came investment proposal only, they were admitted as limited partners. So the liability is only limited to limited to their investment. So the next stage came in the US, where they came up with the concept of limited liability partnership. So all the partners don't have liability that is limited. In case of company it is, but here the significant features are of partnership, whereas the company features are also incorporated. It was predominant form of partnership. Then came LLC, limited liability companies, and it was a strange anymore. It was a company in many ways, but at the same time it had many features of partnership. And I remember sometime in 90s when LLC documents had to be done, they ran into 500 and 700 pages because they had to prove to the tax department that it is a partnership. Because the advantage of partnership is that, it's a generally fiscally transparent entity, and therefore, you want the benefits of no double taxation, dividend, and the corporate tax. So that's how this whole concept came up. But Wyoming came up with the LLC concept, and when tax department looked at it, it felt that this is, this looks more like a partnership. Everybody was very happy. They got limited liability, and they also got the pass-through kind of structure. And that's how the whole history started. And after long deliberations with the tax department going back and forth in the US, tax department said, okay, let's close all this controversy. If you want to be treated as partnership, tell us. If you want to be treated as company, tell us. So in the tax return, there's something called, there's a box. You check the box and say you check the box, and in 5 years you cannot change, and in 85 days or so you take election. So the election system came in, and that's how this whole system of LLC and LLP being treated as fiscally transparent, or like a company at the choice of the taxpayer can be done. But there are a number of different consequences, and it creates its own complexities, and the whole regime has become now very interesting, and over a period of time things have changed. But this is for the US. In India, we had a trust concept, and the trust became fiscally transparent when read with income tax Act 164, etc. And we used to use this as a fiscally transparent entity, right? So those are the kind of things. So how would the other countries' tax department look at the law in other country and apply for its own regulations as well? So these are some of the things that I thought I'd just brief you. But in the context of global structuring, these fiscally transparent entities play a very major role, and it is also a very useful role. As you know, even most of the private equity funds or the venture capital funds are all set up in the form of LP or LLP or LLC at times. It depends on the state and jurisdictions in which you go ahead. So I won't take too much time at this point in time, but we are all eager to hear panel, and may I request Rajesh to now take it over and take forward the discussion. Thank you, Rajesh. Take over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Nishith. And I think you rightly pointed out the historical sort of development in terms of and the changes which happened in US back in 1996, and that's had a tremendous, obviously, implication from a global standpoint, especially when it comes to how do we actually treat these hybrid entities or the so-called hybrid entities, where you may have a situation where one entity looks at it as a company, another country looks at it as a fiscally transparent entity. Even at the international level, I think this is one of the more difficult topics where even till date there is still a lot of challenges around how we actually approach these kind of structures. Going back from the 96, the OECD has looked at it back in 1999 when it looked at the partnership report in terms of saying how do we sort of look at these issues when it comes to a foreign partnership. How do we provide for treaty benefits, or to what extent do we provide for treaty benefits? I think we have two different panelists, Shefali and Dhruv. Shefali is going to start off in terms of how, even in terms of applicability of the treaty, how you actually look at treaty benefits in the context of these hybrid entities or fiscally transparent entities. And then we'll go on to Dhruv. I will introduce this topic after Shefali's session. But again, without too much ado, and Shefali, I'm going to take it to you so that we sort of stay right on time on the first part.
Rajesh, and thank you, Nishith. Thank you for a kind introduction. I just wanted to also be able to respond. Nishith, you mentioned that the world is like a stage, but at least from the way it is appearing for us. In your series of these international tax articles, it is more like a cricket pitch, and probably Dhruv and I more are like opening batsmen for your series. And you have many more speakers coming up with their excellent academic work in terms of the articles and the project. So I'm sure that the audience would really enjoy the series. With that, welcome all. I will now go on presenting my chapter on fiscally transparent entity. It is something which has always been a very fascinating subject for me. As I mentioned in the inaugural session, this took me back to the original times and when one of the cases that we were representing before the AAR dealt with a trust. And I think this is the first time I had come across in my career in terms of, how do the courts look at structures and whether they would be entitled to the treaty benefits or not. Because till then it was always that if you were set up in a jurisdiction, then you would be a resident of that jurisdiction. And we've never had the opportunity to reflect on it to see Whether are you fulfilling all the possible tests, or whether are you a person, are you liable to tax, and therefore are you a resident or not? And since then, I think a lot of things that we have dealt with, and we've come across many other structures where we've dealt with this transparent entity, and also looked at the jurisprudence both in India as well as internationally to analyze whether those entities should be entitled to. Generally, a structure that you would look at is that of an entity which could be set up in the same jurisdiction as that of the shareholders or its members or its partners, or it could be in another jurisdiction. And that entity could then invest in another jurisdiction or earn some income from a source country. And at the time of repatriating the income, the question would often arise as to whether should you give the treaty benefit or not. And in this particular case, as you can see in the diagram, you have this fiscally transparent entity set up in the country B. And while repatriating income from country S, you would have to determine whether treaty benefits of country B and S should be granted, or should you look through it and give the benefit of the treaty between country R and S. Again, I think the situation changes and depends on what is the actual text of each of the tax treaty, as well as what is the approach of both the source country as well as the residence country in dealing with the fiscally transparent. And very often when you're dealing with certain types of entities, it can get even more complicated because even if it's, say, for example, if it's a partnership, but it still may be treated as opaque in one country and it may be treated as transparent in another. That leads to a lot of mismatch, and therefore you have to then look at how the treaty grants the benefit whether at the entity level or at the partner. So normally, as we all know, I think the tax treaties grant the benefits to the residents of one or more states, and then therefore you need to go into the definition of residence for each tax. Because fiscally transparent entities, all types of fiscally transparent entities, are often not fully addressed in the treaties, so very often you are left pending for, in terms of, is your entity defined within the scope of person or is it not? And whether, will it be treated as liable to tax or not? Now, on the fiscally transparent entities, there has been a lot of academic work that has happened. As Rajesh mentioned, one of the first reports on this was the partnership report that was done by the Committee of Fiscal Affairs of OECD in 1999. But this report largely dealt with partnership. And while for India we know that partnerships are treated as taxable units because we do tax the income of the partnership in the hands of the partnership firm and not that in the hands of the partners. Whereas most other countries treat the partnerships as fiscally transparent and only tax the partners on them. Leading from there, further work was done in the hybrid report, and if you see the 2015 Action 2 report, which dealt with a lot of mismatch arising out of the hybrid entities, and then this expanded the scope beyond partnership to even other fiscally transparent. And leading from there, in 2017, there was a revision to both the OECD model and the commentaries, and as a result of that, we now have a revised text which says that the income derived by or through a fiscally transparent entity should be eligible to the treaty review. Such income is treated as income of a resident. And it is very important to note this, it has to be treated as income of a resident, which means that it should not only be taxed with respect of only the territorial tax or the source-based tax, it should be given an equal treatment as if it was income of a resident. And if income is treated in that manner, then the benefit of treaty has to be granted because either it is taxed at the entity level or it is taxed at the member level. But benefit has to be. Similar text was adopted in the Article 3 of the MLI as well. And we will see that even with this, there are still a lot of ambiguities as many countries have experienced. So what do we have in terms of the countries that have taken positions? We know that countries like US, Austria, Netherlands, Canada, Singapore, they do treat partnerships as transparent. But we've got some interesting rulings in countries, and notably, once in the UK and Canada, where we've seen some early cases of treating these fiscally transparent entities, and which overturn the position taken by the revenue authority. So if we take the first case, say in UK, that of Ansel, this was a case of 2015, where prior to that, the UK HMRC position was to treat the partnerships as opaque. But in this case, the courts took a different view and they gave the treaty relief to the members or the partners and treated the income derived by the partner from the partnership was of the same source as the income derived by the partnership. And then on a flow-through basis, it gave the credit for the taxes paid by the partnership together. Likewise, even in Canada, the case of TD Securities is a very famous case where the LLCs were treated as liable to tax for treaty purposes, and therefore the US-Canada treaty was applied to give benefit to the LLC. There has also been another position in France where the partners were to be eligible to the treaty benefit. So in the case of SA Diamond, where there was a rental income received from a French company by a Dutch CB, and it was still treated, and then the benefit of the treaty should be granted on the basis that the entity was a flow-through, but the ultimate shareholder was a taxable entity, and therefore it was entitled to the treaty protection. Against this, we've had a case in Australia, the one in the case of Resource Capital LP, where there were Cayman limited partnerships, which were largely owned by the US resident limited partners. And this the Cayman LPs were investing in Australian public company shares. And on the sale of shares, the Australian court did not grant the treaty benefit to the Cayman limited partners. Interestingly, they held that the Cayman limited partnerships were more like companies. And therefore, they stopped at the company level. They did not look to the ultimate residents who are US residents. And they said that there is no evidence that the ultimate beneficiary, that the Cayman partnerships were actually a resident of the US, and therefore they did not give the benefit of the US-Australia. So we've seen some divergence in terms of how the different courts have approached, although I can say that by and large, majority courts do seem to have taken a position of granting the treaty relief to such entities, either at the entity level or at their members level. In India, we've had interesting situations where these kind of issues have arisen for the trust or for the partnerships, and only that these are not entities which are liable to tax. And as Nishith mentioned, in terms of the trust, we do know that some trusts are treated as transparent, and some are taxed at the entity level, especially if they are discretionary in nature. Likewise for partnerships as well, if the other countries treating it as opaque, or then India would equally give the benefit to the partnership, but if it is treated as transparent, this issue would arise. But in terms of liability to tax, we've had interesting cases in the context of UAE residents as well as Mauritius resident entities. These entities, these countries do not tax foreign residents or entities that are set up in UAE or Mauritius in terms of all of their income. They have a selective tax that applies, although they do treat them as tax residents for their domestic purposes as well as for treaty purposes. But early enough in India, we have seen litigation, whether it was in the case of Emirati or Green Emirates in the context of Dubai, or whether it was the famous case of Azadi Bachao Andolan, where this issue of whether is liability to tax, is that a legal position or is it a fiscal fact? That issue was addressed by the Supreme Court of India. And by and large, I think the view has been from the highest court that it should be viewed more as a legal position. So long as the country of your residence has the ability to tax your income, that is sufficient, and the tax does not necessarily have to be actually paid to claim the tax residence of that. But again, in India, we've seen divergent views on this subject, and especially now that India has rejected the OECD approach of taxing or looking through the partnerships or looking through the fiscally transparent entities and granting the benefit to their members. But we would rather, we've expressed a reservation on that. And as a result of that, that does lead to some conclusion. Hopefully, we should have the Indian administration issue some clarity. I just would give a comparison between the OECD model and the India position. Of course, my chapter in the book talks about this more in detail. But at the conceptual level, OECD defines a fiscally transparent entity as an entity or an arrangement whose income is not taxed at the level of the entity, but at the hands of the partners or the members who have an interest in this entity. The OECD model also defines person, who specifically included individual, company, and any other model. And this is the definition that we will see in the proper distinction when we look at some of the other treaties. There is a difference in the language used here. But as such, if you see the definition of person, other fiscally transparent entities, such as a partnership or a trust or an LLC, they are not specifically included in the definition. Very often, they have to either be covered within a definition of entity or as a body of person if they qualify as such. Against that, if you see India's position, again, most of the treaties, there is no separate mention of any fiscally transparent entity. Some positions vary from treaty to treaty. Because the India-US tax treaty, which does define person, will include a corporation, a partnership, and other taxable units. Which means that a corporation or a partnership per se are treated as persons, but any other taxable unit will also be treated as a person. Against that, if you see the India-Austria treaty, person is defined to mean partnership, trust, estate, or a body of persons, provided they are regarded as taxable units. Now here I think there is a distinction. It qualifies partnership, trust, etc., provided they are treated as taxable. So that is how we coming to the definition of resident and liable to tax. Again, here the focus is more on the fiscal domicile, and this concept has been explained more in detail by many of our tax students. We have to bear in mind that while defining or while interpreting all of these terms, we have to keep the object and the purpose of the treaty in mind, then interpret the treaties using those definitions. The updated definition, as we saw already from the OECD, states that these entities have to be treated as residents to the extent that the income is treated as the income of resident for tax purposes. Now, in this case, we have had situations, so for example, if there are trusts with beneficiaries being residents in multiple countries, then you could have a situation that, for some beneficiaries, you do get the treaty relief, whereas for the other beneficiaries, you may not get it. Especially in case of pension trust, it might be a very, difficult task to go and chase each and every beneficiary to assess, where that beneficiary is a resident. Compared to that, the Indian position on liability to tax, we already talked about Azadi Bachao Andolhan, where the courts placed emphasis on the legal situation and not the fiscal fact. We also have a ruling in the case of Hamid Chand Mehta, where the tax tribunal has held that the resident status is independent of the actual levy of tax. So, many interesting rulings. If you look at the other ruling in the case of Linklaters, this is where one of the path-breaking rulings where the tax tribunal did take a very good view and said that the OECD guidance is not adhered to by India, but nevertheless for Indian purposes and for the purposes of the treaty, the partnerships are to be treated as taxable entities. And because the partners are residents of that country and they did grant the treaty benefit even before the treaty was actually applied. Following from there, we have a case of AP Motor Works, again, where the tribunal did hold that the taxability of the income was more important than the mode of taxability. Now, this is where we've seen that consistently the courts have stepped in and taken a more liberal meaning to grant the treaty benefit with an objective of avoiding double taxation. We also had the High Court ruling in the case of B&O Deloitte, again, where the partnerships were treated as a person under the Indian income tax law and assessed as a firm. We had a ruling in the case of a Swiss company, where unfortunately, in fact, it was a Swiss partnership, where both the partners were also resident of Switzerland, but the AR did not grant the treaty relief, neither to the partnership nor to the partners. And the last case that I have on that is a very interesting case of ING Webunar, where again the Mumbai Tribunal has taken a very dynamic view, and they have looked at, so one of the principles that have been established is that when you interpret a treaty, give the ordinary meaning, don't go by literal interpretation. Likewise, keep the objective purpose in mind, and then interpret the treaty such that you are able to give the benefit rather than take it away, so that the object of the treaty is served. And this is a very, very constructive interpretation of the treaties without going into very literal. MLI we talked about has a similar text, but since India has reserved the right, we do have some difficulty in terms of how we might act. With this, I think we should be able to leave the thought with the audience. And in a situation such as this, where you have India's stated position that the partnerships, that we don't want to look beyond the partnerships, we treat the transparent as the taxable entities. And either you have the treaty benefit at that level or you don't have it at all. And how valid is that argument? Are we right in holding the view that we should not be forced to do it because our domestic law does not permit it? Or that in the interest of double tax avoidance, that we should look at it more comprehensively and depending again on the nature of entity, with that, I would hand it over back to Rajesh for any comments that you might want to add.
Like when you're saying that from an Indian perspective, we tend to look at a particular entity and determine whether or not treaty benefits ought to be granted basis its status. In fact, there was a recent judgment by the AAR where they said that in the context of a trust which was set up with a sovereign which was actually behind it, and the AAR actually went ahead and said that we are not going to actually look at the trust as a revocable trust or apply the normal principles of trust taxation. Look at the status of the beneficiary and provide the treaty benefit, which was probably the outcome that we were expecting, and said that we are going to look at the trust as a separate entity and going to deny treaty benefits because the trust was set up in a non-treaty. So you do end up, unfortunately, with conflicting set of issues in terms of where certain judgments say you have to give a purpose of meaning. The OECD approach also is that look at who the partners are and provide the treaty benefit, whereas in the Indian context, it's been a sort of mixed sort of approach. And which sort of takes me to, I think, I'll come to you now in terms of the whole issue around hybrid entities, and especially when we are talking about multiple countries being involved, because you have a fiscally transparent entity which is set up in an intermediate country, you have the source country, you have the residence country, because you are no longer looking at just taxation in one country. Or you have to provide for a holistic view in terms of what would be the consequence and the allocation rights which each of the countries, and along with characterization related issues. So I think that's probably a good point for you to sort of pitch in terms of your business.
Thank you very much, Rajesh, and thank you very much, Shefali. It's an honor actually for me to present this chapter because this chapter is part of the book that was written in Desai's honor. And thank you very much for this opportunity. Before I go on, my presentation is more of a thought experiment about how perhaps some of the holes left by Article 3 of the MLI or Article 1, 2, and 1, 3 of the 2017 model, I think it's a step in the right direction, but it leaves certain holes, and how do we manage those loopholes? Before I get onto that, I'd like to dwell a little bit on what exactly is a hybrid entity. I spoke about trusts and partnerships, and so did Shefali. But are these the only type of entities that can qualify as hybrid entities? Can a company, let's say a BV in the Netherlands or a GmbH in Germany, which are akin to a private limited company in India, or for that matter, a private limited company itself, can that now qualify as a fiscally transparent entity? Well, in their home jurisdictions, that is the jurisdiction in which they are established, surely they are not fiscally transparent. But can they be treated as being fiscally transparent by another jurisdiction? And if it is indeed treated to be fiscally transparent by another jurisdiction, that's where the hybridity comes in. Hybridity in the context of tax treaties means one jurisdiction regards an entity or arrangement to be fiscally transparent, the other one does not. And this really is the core. So think about, Nishith, I mentioned check the box. Check the box was indeed invented for the purposes of domestic tax law in the US, but it's also expanded on foreign subsidiaries of US companies. So a Dutch BV, they say, is similar to an LLC, and therefore, even if under Dutch law it is a company, and there is no doubt about whether it qualifies as a person for the purposes of a tax treaty. The question still arises, will that company be treated as a taxable entity by the US if the taxpayer has checked the box or has elected to treat it as a flow-through entity? CFC legislation, where you could have a company in another jurisdiction which is regarded as a non-existent, as a flow-through entity, in which its income is then further attributed to the shareholders of that company by the tax laws of that state. In that case, again, a company, it doesn't matter if it is a private limited or public, need to be treated as a fiscally transparent entity. And these are all examples of hybrid entities. Just to sort of engage in a little bit of thought experimentation, can an individual be a hybrid entity? Here we have clubbing provisions where if I were a minor, then my income could be clubbed to that of my parent. So if my parent were to be resident elsewhere, or if I were to be resident elsewhere, clubbing would still happen. In that sort of a situation, perhaps because my income flows through to my father, in that particular case, one could argue a natural person could also become a hybrid entity for tax treaty purposes. Anyway, I'm not going to talk more on this particular issue, but the approach that has been adopted as a step in the right direction by the OECD and now also the United Nations in how to tackle hybrid entities. We spoke about it last week itself as to there are two mantras in the partnerships report, and partnerships report is basically what the EMLI tries to codify within tax treaties. And what are these two mantras? The first mantra is, for the purposes of attribution of income to a person, source state should follow the attribution rules of the resident state. So as long as the hybrid entity exists, so the source state we regard an entity to be transparent, but the resident state of that entity regards it to be opaque, and therefore taxes it accordingly. The source state must indeed attribute the income to that parent entity, even if it regards it to be transparent for tax treaty purposes. There's an exception to this, and that exception is except when the source state contributes the income to its own resident or residents. Now, the second mantra that emerged from the partnerships report was for the purposes of characterization of income, also known as conflict of qualification. In the hands of the taxpayer, the resident state follows the source state. This was based on the interpretation that most terms which are undefined in a tax treaty and not many items of income, so to say, are largely undefined or partly defined. And in that particular case, Article 3.2 would refer to the domestic interpretation of the source state implying the treaty. And therefore, its interpretation, even if it may be divergent from that of the resident state, would be the correct interpretation that all the resident state thereafter has to do. This would be double taxation. And this is the idea in a conflict of income qualification. And therefore, insofar as characterization of income is concerned, resident state follows the source state. Now, mantra 1 is completely codified for the purposes of contribution of income to person, source follows residence. This has been codified in Article 1, paragraph. I will not belabor this point any further. I think people can read it by themselves. It's a lot of text. So I will move on to the next part. There was an exception in the first mantra as well. It said that except when the source state contributes income to its own residents. And this has been codified in Article 1, paragraph 3 for the so-called saving clause. It says this convention shall not affect the taxation by a contracting state of its own residents. Word own was my own. What about mantra 2, which was for characterization of income? Residence follows source. Well, there has been no codification of this. There has really been no explicit provision of this respect. One would still have to rely on the logic of Article 3.2, referring or giving the source state the right to primary interpretation and the resident state thereafter following. But the fact that this was not codified might lead to some problem. Let's look at this situation. HCO is a company which is resident of state H, and this degree is called ESCO. Both these countries regard HCO to be an opaque entity, a company. And ESCO pays dividends to HCO in the sole shareholder. Now, the HS tax treaty says the maximum permissible dividends withholding tax in state S is 10%. Now, most of us would say, all right, even if state S has a 30% withholding tax rate, the tax treaty would restrict it to 10%. What happens when you have a state R, which is the parent company of HCO? Does HCO to be a fiscally transparent entity? In this particular case, the dividends paid by ESCO to HCO are actually contributed to ARCO by the domestic laws of the resident state of ARCO, which is state R. And the RS treaty says the maximum withholding tax rate over here is 5%. Now the question arises, well, if you apply Article 1, paragraph 2 of the RS tax treaty, then the first one, what's right, is for the purposes of attribution of income to a person, the source must follow residence. And in that case, you say the treaty will be applicable. Both tax treaties, the HS and the RS treaty, will be applicable. Does that mean that the RS treaty will apply and the state S withholding tax would be limited to 5% and not 10%? If the OECD commentary after the partnerships report were to be accepted, then the answer was yes, indeed, the lower of the withholding tax provisions would be that case. Now, we'll keep this example in mind and we deal with some of the issues that arise from the fact that the second mantra has not been codified. It leads to a fairly interesting legal issue. Article 1, paragraph 2, you all know what it says. State S has to follow the attribution rules of both state H and state R. Then we apply Article 10 of both tax treaties. According to the earlier commentary, yes, indeed, the lower rate will be applicable on state S. However, is this really consistent with the idea of a beneficial owner? Now, if HCO as a company has its own board of directors and makes its own independent decisions, and it must be regarded as the beneficial owner, is it also now possible that ARCO, without having any control over these dividends, without being able to enjoy the fruits of the tree, so to say, regarded also as the beneficial owner of these dividends? To my mind, there could only be one beneficial owner in those cases, unless of course we have more different see altogether. So, what about mantra 2? Does state R now follow state S's characterization of the income? State S's characterization would be that, well, this attribution of income by state R, the dividends, are not really covered by Article 10, because Article 10 says dividends paid by a company which is a resident of state S to a resident of state R. A beneficial owner clarifies the meaning of the term paid to as to whether the income has been paid to. And if you say the income has not actually been paid to or put at the disposal of ARCO, ARCO is not the beneficial owner, and therefore the geographical scope of Article 10 is not satisfied. So Article 10 would simply not be applicable according to state S. So what? Do we apply Article 21 for the RS tax treaty? This would lead to a fairly absurd result in itself, and much more absurd than state S being reduced, state S's withholding tax rates being reduced by the RS treaty as well. Because if the treaty follows the OECD Article 21, then it would grant exclusive taxing rights over the dividends to state R, and state S wouldn't be able to tax anything whatsoever. And that clearly is not intended, and in my submission would be an absurd result. So that clearly would be the answer. Let's look at another situation, which I think might pique the interest of some practitioners. State H, again, has a company which it regards to be opaque, earns business profits from state S. Now, in the HS tax treaty, they have a services PE clause, and if these business profits, or at least part thereof, are indeed attributable to this services PE in state S. So now, if you were to apply Article 7 of the HS tax treaty, there would be something which is attributable to this permanent establishment services fee that would be taxable in state S. And state H, if there is Article 23A of the OECD model adopted in the treaty, which is an exemption clause, state H may not tax this income. Now, in a bilateral situation, yes, there is single taxation. State S taxes and state H does not. But now consider the same scenario. ARCO is the shareholder of HCO, and state R considers HCO, to be a transparent entity, and therefore attributes these business profits to ARCO. Now, services PE clauses are not universal in most countries' arsenals of tax treaty. So now you have the RS tax treaty that does not have any services PE clause. If you were to follow Article 1, paragraph 2, what happens now? The RS treaty is applicable, and you could apply either Article 7 or 21, does not matter, they contain the same distributive rule of this particular case. There is no services PE in state S, Article 7 or 21 would say, sorry, state S, you cannot tax. You have no taxation in state S despite there being a services PE. Now let's go a step further. Given that our code considers each code to be a fiscally transparent entity, and each code must have a fixed place of business. If it is transparent, then all of each code's assets would flow through as well to our code, in which case that fixed place of business would qualify as a permanent establishment in Argo's interpretation of Article 5 of the RH tax treaty. If in this particular case, of course, all of the income would surely be attributable to that BE, which is a fixed place of business. If in this case, the RH treaty also adopts Article 23A, what happens? State R also has to exempt that same income. In this diagram that you see, none of the countries are able to tax the income on account of how different tax treaties interplay with each other. And all of this is, so to say, caused by Article 1, Paragraph 2. So this is one of the big loopholes, actually, that Article 1.2 uses in tax treaties if all countries were to accept Article 1.2 or Article 3 of the MLI. Can we refine the tax treaty rules to avoid such odd outcomes? Now, I'm going to examine a few tax treaty rules. Most distributive rules of a tax treaty contain scopes of those distributive rules, which includes an attribution linked to a person. It does not say which person ought to be taxed, but there is indeed a connection between an income and a person. So think about Article 7. It says profits of an enterprise of a contracting state. Now, enterprise of a contracting state has been defined in Article 3.d of the model, which says profits of an enterprise carried on by a resident of a contracting state. So you need to have a resident who is carrying on an enterprise, or the income that arises, that is, profits from that enterprise, would fall within the substantive scope of Article 7. But there is a link made between the person being the resident, and there is a condition that it must be that person who carries on that particular enterprise or business for Article 7 to be triggered. Similarly, you have Article 10, we already dealt with it. There is phase 2, it has to be put at the disposal of a given person, it is clarified by the benefits of over requirement, which is nothing but an attribution. Royalties beneficially owned by a resident. Again, the person, only that person who beneficially owns the royalties would be entitled to the protection of Article 12. Article 16, again, directors' fees and other similar payments derived by resident in his capacity as a member of the board of directors of the company. Again, that person to whom you are attributing a given item of income ought to be the director of a company. And it is only in that capacity, only if that person earns it in his or her capacity as a director, would the substantive scope of Article 16 be satisfied. Again, Article 17 is another example. There is, however, one major exception to this rule, that a distributive rule makes no reference at all to that person who must earn the income or that particular item of income, that particular distributive rule would be triggered. And that exception is Article 21. It simply says item of income of a resident of. Now, income is a very broad concept. It includes deemed fictions. In fact, income is not a real concept at all. Just think about in India, you have the real estate deemed to be let out, house property deemed to be let out. You are attributed certain income in a deemed to be let out house property, which is not real income that you are earning out of it and you pay taxable on it. And yet it is no income. So in the case of a hybrid entity where an individual or a person is an item of income by a deeming fiction of the law, in that particular case, well, that income is indeed the income of a resident. There's no doubt about that. So there could really, in the catch-all clause, be no particular attribution link, so to say. But there is a very interesting history to Article 21. In 1963, which was when the first draft convention was released by the OECD, wording was slightly different than it is now. It said, in items of income of a resident of a contracting state, which are not expressly mentioned in the foregoing articles. 1977, this was changed, where not expressly mentioned was changed to not dealt with in the foregoing articles. Why exactly is this the case? Well, there's a profound difference in these two provisions. Item of income may have been mentioned, but that particular distributive rule might not have been successful in allocating tax rights over it. Again, think about a situation where dividends have been attributed to the shareholder of the company which is actually receiving dividends. The person has received that income, so to say. But because the dividends has not been paid to that parent company or the shareholder, the substantive or the geographical scope of Article 10 would not be satisfied. Article 10 in that particular case, in the example that we saw, simply does not succeed in allocating taxing rights. In that particular case, also, even if the item of income has been mentioned in Article 21 is capable of dealing with it and allocating taxing rights. So this 1977 iteration of Article 21 deals not only with items of income not mentioned, but also those items of income which are mentioned but have not been dealt with by other distributors. Now, why am I talking about this? I think this really presents the key how one could resolve the issues that I've just dealt with in the hybrid entities provisions. Here's a simplified version of the actual proposal that I proposed in the book chapter for Nishith. But if you split up Article 21 into have Article 21A, which deals with items of income of a resident of a contracting state, wherever arising, mentioned but not dealt with in the foregoing provision, and that these shall be taxable only in the other contract, that is, the source state. Then you could have Article 21B, which deals with items of income that are not mentioned at all, which could follow the current system of the OECD model. What would this help us achieve? Here's the impact. Again, H code is a resident of state H, derives business profits from state S, and it is attributable to a services fee in state S. Article 23A applies, so state H cannot tax. ARCO is the parent company and attributes HCO's profits to ARCO because it treats HCO as a discrete transparent company. And this particular case, the RS treaty, now you don't have a services PE clause, but business profits which are attributed to ARCO are mentioned but not dealt with by Article 7. This item of income is not derived from the carrying on of the enterprise by ARCO. It is another person that carries on the enterprise. This particular case, Article 21A, items of income mentioned but not dealt with, would grant exclusive taxing rights to State S. State S would indeed be able to tax the income. And State R by itself would not be able to tax the income because it only artificially attributes the income to its own resident, but not actually the person earning the income. In this particular case, one would say it is justified that the source state taxes the income and State R may not tax this particular item. not matter whether there's Article 23A or 23B in the RE. Result will remain the same. So here is a simplified version. Now this proposal that I have come up with has its own problems and leads to a certain set of issues with in some peculiar scenarios. But this is not really the platform to go into even further nitty-gritty than I already have. And so I would recommend people, if you're interested in figuring out how one could do this, at least on a theoretical basis, you might be interested in looking at the chapter in the book that we've dedicated. Thank you very much for your patience with a highly theoretical presentation. I appreciate it very much, and I'd be glad to take any questions.
Thanks, Dhruv. I think
we extend the session by 15 minutes or so, maybe you can make some comment.
Yeah. So I think, Dhruv, I think it was very interesting because I think what you effectively brought out are the dynamics, especially when we talk about three-country structure and where you have an intermediate company which is treated as a fiscally transparent entity in terms of how each country would have to tax. Obviously, in the Indian context, the way that India has generally treated is to look at the intermediate company, see whether the entity is liable to tax or not, and basis that just look at the treaty, which obviously is not necessarily what is the approach that OECD has formulated. I did note that there was a comment from Raksha where she did mention that despite Azadi Bachao Andolan decided on liability tax, we still go through the same issues time and again in India. Unfortunately, unlike in certain other jurisdictions where we have seen the income tax authorities come out with clear clarifications on different kinds of entities, we've not really seen that in the Indian context, so that's always a challenge that we will get. I think just picking up from the questions from what I see on the platforms, I think there are 2 points, there were 2 questions I would take. I think the first one, I do note that there was a question in terms of how an LLC would be taxed, whether it be treated as a very transparent entity. I don't know. Again, if you look at it, there is very thin case law in India. In fact, one of the cases that I've seen, in fact, didn't even go into the question of this question wasn't even raised, and they went in on the description of the LLC qualifies for treaty benefit. So, sort of looking at it objectively when you think about it, again, just look at what Azadi says. It's still LLC still should be treated as a company. You still look at the liability tax and you go ahead on that basis. But I do note that there are a number of other questions which I see on trust. And Shefali, just on an overarching basis, when it comes to foreign trust and how do you sort of think about treaty benefits when it comes to foreign trust? We know that there is very little case law around it in India. Most of it is in the domestic context, but it will be interesting to hear your thoughts on it.
Thanks, Rajesh. So, in the context of trust, I think what would be most appropriate is first to see whether the trust, which jurisdiction is the trust set up? Is it treated as a legal entity at all? Who is really being assessed to tax? I think sometimes, we've seen huge differences in approaches from a common law jurisdiction versus a civil law jurisdiction. Most importantly, I would say that you have to see whether it qualifies as a person for tax treaty purposes or not, and then you go down to see whether it is liable to tax. And many times we do find that if the trust is a transparent entity, and the trustee, while as a representative assessee is being subject to tax or being assessed to tax, but depending again on the arrangement and where the beneficiaries are situated, it may or may not even be present. Although I must, the case that I cited during my presentation, that of ING Vivard, I think that was quite useful because it did talk about a structure which was an MPR entity in Netherlands, and it did talk about a structure where the trustee was being assessed. It was not a legal entity at all, it was just an arrangement. But in that particular case, because the beneficiaries themselves were resident of that same country, tribunal took that view that what is important is whether the income of the entity is taxed in that country or not. It is not important in whose hands it is found, right? So on that basis, they did grant the treaty benefit. I think in the Indian context, the issue arises because of some administrative requirement. Like for example, if you can't produce a tax residency certificate, right? That is the first barrier where you then have to start dealing with, whether is that the only piece of evidence? Do I have anything else to show that I'm still a resident of that country or not? But I think the insistence of India that you must produce a tax residency certificate for that entity, that becomes kind of a gating item. So again, I think the answer would be that you have to look at treaty by treaty. In some countries, if you qualify as a person, if you're specifically called out as a person, and so long as you're able to show that your income is taxable, either in your hands or that of the members, by that you should be able to get the treaty benefit. But tax doesn't.
Thanks, Shefali. And I think we've seen so many different permutations and combinations in terms of the use of hybrid entities. I did see certain questions as to why do people actually use hybrid entities. Again, especially in the context of private equity funds or even sovereign wealth funds. And again, the context here is that as tax lawyers, we sometimes tend to look at only tax law, but there are multiple different reasons why, in case of pension sovereign, why they do use hybrid entities. Somebody is a US person, they definitely love using hybrid entities purely because at the US level, you have other complications like control foreign corporations and keeping in mind. To sort of avoid all of that, they do want to use hybrid entities. Similarly, you have other pension funds or sovereigns who may be potentially set up under their local law. They want to have actually hybrid entities, like the example I mentioned earlier, in order to sometimes actually get a treaty benefit. Because for them, any tax is actually sort of a deduction from their returns because they are otherwise generally not taxed. I think one question, and I did see it coming from one of the panelists, where they had sort of indicated that the hybrid situation wouldn't just Article 21 of the UN Convention, which provides for the restricted rights of tax. So we need a separate new provision, as you alluded to. I'm happy to hear your thoughts around that.
Yeah, I think Article 21.3 of the UN model partially does resolve the issue. But the question then is, what do you mean by income arising in a state? Because arising is again a very difficult term to interpret. So if you look at Article 11, paragraph 5 and 12, paragraph 5, it defines when interest arises in a state and when it is not. Other items of income really doesn't have any definition at all. So you could then have the exacerbated issue of source conflicts as well, which treaties don't deal with very well. And if you read the more, and that is basically where the complexity, that was the complexity I was talking about, which the more full solution deals with. But furthermore, there is this is the basic problem of not all countries agree to the UN model Article 21. And in that sort of a situation, you just have problems where there might be some cases in which you have Article 21, in other cases you don't. On that note, I can surely put my hand up and say none of the countries have Article 21. In that case, that's a wash.
Yeah, thanks, Dhruv. I know we have sort of gone slightly over time limit. So Nishith, for last concluding remarks, over to you. All of these sessions are in your honor, so you get the last one.
No, all that I can say and tell the audience is that all three of you have been so brilliant, and I've been lucky to be having worked with you. And of course, compared to last session, we had about 500 people, today we were 1,000. So I thought it would also be in the fitness of things to introduce you all at the end, so now they know your competencies and capabilities, and it would be very nice for me. I think I'm very happy to be talking about it a bit. Let me just, reintroduce people. This session has been wonderful to start with, and tax transparent entity have always been a very challenging both for the taxpayers and tax administration, and it requires a lot of theoretical and academic understanding of these concepts and jurisdictional issues. So as I mentioned, way back in 1990s, when being introduced this LLC concept, and see that there were so many that are coming, and as all of you explained in great detail, the fallouts of those situations. Just a matter of introduction, I think first let me introduce Shefali. Many of you may or may not know, but she is a chartered accountant. She was a gold medalist, and she worked with me for 14 years. And we had the great pleasure of, working on a number of cases. And the general philosophy we followed was almost every case creates a new jurisprudence. So we don't like to generally say that, okay, we are covered by this case, okay, that's now thing. So starting with AIGIL and FL, it was private equity fund case, G, pension trust, Schillenberg, Azadi Bachao Andolan. So I think that was one of the most fascinating cases for people together. Morgan Stanley TP case and Vodafone and many other things that, it has been such a fascinating journey, and your contribution, I can never forget, Shefali, I really want to wish you all the best on your happy birthday today. We are conveying you a virtual cake, maybe, and you can virtually cut it, and everybody will say happy birthday to you. Thank you so much. Yeah, again, Dhruv, you've been a wonderful junior, and today what you've achieved, and you've been, in Netherlands right now, and the academic circle, and your technical and the academic knowledge came out so brilliantly in your presentation, and so I think I don't need to talk too much about it, but thank you very much for taking this initiative of producing essays in international taxation. I think it gives opportunity to all of us to work together, and I think enjoy these celebrations. So thank you so much. Really enjoy. And of course, Rajesh, you've been my pillar. By the way, Rajesh did his master's in law with international taxation in the US, and came back and about 10-15 years ago, and we're working again all landmark cases we've been going on. So it's so much of a fun. So as a firm, we are more like quasi university, and commercial part is one, but at the same time, academics gives you intellectual portion and intellectual stimulation, and it's been very, very, exciting to be working on new ideas, new thought process, and we spend almost 40% of our time on research, academics, and leadership, and we are extremely delighted to be sharing all this knowledge. We are an open source law firm with all of you participants and attendees. You've been very generous in coming to this place in virtual way today. I hope we continue. Also, it occurs to me that many of the associates and many of the professionals, if you need some certificate of attendance, that also will be happy to grant you. And if you would like anybody else to attend, that also will be fine. The way in which this whole program is going, and each session is somewhat independent of each other. So, you can attend all of them, and if you miss first one or two, the rest of them are also with you. But it's always a great pleasure to be, sharing, and I think that's the best way to get. And I would just ask any of the panelists if you want to add any word, and a minute, anyone wants to make a closing comment.
So I would just say thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pai.
It's been wonderful time, Thank you so much once again. And we'll close this session here. I think the recording also will be available in about 3-4 days' time. And if any of you receive the program, there is a red button at the bottom, which you can press and you get all the previous recordings, wide number of subjects we have covered in our educational program. And most welcome. Once again, thank you.